There's a Skinwalker on the London Underground. Run. If you ever find yourself on the London Underground past midnight, don't fall asleep. Don't make eye contact with anyone sitting directly across from you. And if someone calls your name, but you're sure no one on that train should know it, run. My name is Daniel Grant. I work for Transport for London, and I should have listened to the warnings before I saw its face. I always thought the stories were urban myths, whispers passed around by night shift workers, or the ramblings of the homeless people who'd taken up residence in forgotten tunnels. But that was before the Jubilee Line train I was inspecting stopped between stations, and something boarded that wasn't listed on Manifest. It all started 2 nights ago. I'd been pulled for emergency maintenance on one of the newer automatic trains, Unit 4217. It had stalled between Westminster and Green Park. These driverless trains were prone to system hiccups, but this wasn't the usual AI glitch. The report said passengers heard whistling in the tunnel, and some claimed to see a man crawling along the outside of the carriages. That didn't make sense. The tunnels are sealed tight. No walkway, no access hatches. It was impossible. Still, orders were orders. I stepped onto the platform at Westminster, toolkit in hand, radio clipped to my vest. It was just after 12:45 a.m. The station was deserted. Just the low hum of fluorescence and the rhythmic echo of electricity in the rails. The train, dim and lifeless, sat about 50 meters into the tunnel. The emergency lights were flickering, casting the tunnel walls in a dull, sickly orange. Something about it felt wrong, like the tunnel was breathing. Alive. The air felt thick, oppressive, like stepping into a basement that hadn't been opened in years. I climbed into the front carriage. Empty, dust on the seats, a faint smell of copper and oil. And the doors behind me shut on their own. I spun around, expecting to see someone messing with me, maybe a prank from another worker. But there was no one. The lights dimmed further. I turned on my headlamp, the beam slicing through the gloom like a scalpel. That's when I saw it. At the far end of the carriage, through the window of the next door, was a figure. Tall, gaunt, wrong. The limbs were too long, arms hanging well below the waist, fingers like wire. It didn't move. It just stood there, staring. Or rather, its face was turned toward me, because there were no eyes. Just smooth, pale skin where features should have been. No mouth. No nose. Just skin pulled tight like wax over bone. I blinked. It was gone. I opened the door to the next carriage, heart pounding. Empty again. Just the low, almost inaudible buzz of the overheads and my own breath fogging in the cold air. I radioed dispatch. Control, this is Daniel. I'm on Unit 4217. All carriages clear. Some power irregularities. Over. Crackling silence. Control, do you copy? Something tripped the doors back here. Need a systems reboot. Still nothing. I reached for my phone. No signal. Then I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A scraping. Like something dragging along metal. Not from behind me, but above. On the roof of the train. It crawled. Slow. Deliberate. Metallic claws tapping, then scratching like it was testing the material. I pressed my back to the wall, eyes on the ceiling. The scraping paused. Silence. Then, with a violent bang, the ceiling panel above me dented inward, as if something heavy had just dropped on top. I ran. I burst through carriage after carriage, sprinting through the narrow connectors, until I reached the rear car. I tried opening the emergency exit. It wouldn't budge. The manual override was gone. Ripped out. That's when I noticed it again. Reflected in the emergency glass panel next to the door. A face. But this time it was mine. My face staring at me. Same eyes. Same scar on the brow from a childhood accident. Same everything. But the mouth was wrong. It was open unnaturally wide, jaw unhinged like a snake, as if it had no bone. And the sound it was making was a high-pitched whistle. Not melodic, just a long, broken, discordant note. It wasn't a reflection. It was behind me. I turned, ready to swing the heavy flashlight like a weapon. But there was nothing. Only the long, cold silence of a dead train in a forgotten tunnel. Until I saw the scratches on the window. For long gouges. Deep. Fresh. As if someone or something had raked claws across the glass from the inside. I backed away slowly, careful not to trip over the loose emergency gear scattered on the floor. Then the lights cut out completely, and I heard it again, closer this time, whistling, the same pitch, low at first, then slowly rising. I held my breath, trying not to move, trying not to think, trying not to exist, because whatever this thing was, it could feel me. I knew it, like it was hunting by sound, or scent. Something brushed past my leg. I froze. The air grew colder, stale, like a freezer left open in the dead of winter. My breath misted in the dark, visible only by the faint glow of the emergency sign behind me. And then, movement, a blur of limbs. Too fast, crawling on the ceiling like an insect. No sound, just the whistle. I turned on my headlamp again and swept it across the ceiling. And there it was, clinging to the ceiling, upside down, wearing my face. But not just my face now. My uniform, my ID badge, perfectly copied. It grinned at me, then snapped its limbs sideways like broken joints resetting and dropped from the ceiling in one motion. I didn't wait. I turned, kicked the emergency window out, and dove into the tunnel. As I scrambled to my feet, something slammed into the train door behind me. Hard, and the whistling turned into a scream. But it wasn't loud. It was inside my head. I ran blind through the tunnel, guided only by the faint emergency lights and sheer adrenaline. My radio crackled again. Daniel, we've been trying to reach you. Where are you? I couldn't speak. I just kept running, because something was wearing my skin, and it wasn't finished yet. If it calls out to you in your own voice, don't answer. If it wears your face, don't look it in the eyes. And if you're unlucky enough to see it crawl on the ceiling, then you were never meant to survive. I broke every rule that night, and now it knows me. My legs burned as I ran through the tunnel, lungs scraping against the cold, musty air. Every few seconds, I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see that thing chasing me on all fours like a rabid animal. But all I heard was silence, and that silence was worse. The further I got from the stalled train, the more warped the tunnel began to feel. The walls seemed to close in around me. The lights grew dimmer, flickering in unnatural rhythms like they were breathing with me, watching. I reached a maintenance hatch near the junction tunnel between Green Park and Bond Street. It had always been locked for as long as I'd worked with transport for London. But tonight, the heavy rusted latch was already undone, swaying slightly like someone, or something, had just passed through. I should have turned back, reported to control, waited for backup. But that scream, that face, my face, it had violated something deeper than fear. It had taken something from me, and part of me needed to know what it was. I opened the hatch and climbed down into the auxiliary tunnel. My flashlight flickered, and for a second, the beam caught a smear of blood leading forward. Not a lot, just a streak, like a handprint dragged along the concrete. The tunnel down here was tighter, barely wide enough to walk without brushing your shoulders against the walls. Every footstep echoed like a gunshot, and I became hyper-aware of how loud my breathing was. I tried to hold it back, to muffle it, but it was impossible. The air tasted like mildew and rusted iron. And then a whisper, not ahead of me, behind. It said, "Daniel." My name, spoken in my own voice, but slower, warped like something wearing my vocal cords as a disguise. I spun around, flashlight aimed into the dark. Nothing, but the whisper came again, this time closer. Daniel. It wasn't just mimicking my voice, it was learning how to use it. The inflection, the pitch, the breathing. As if the more I listened, the more real it became. I ran again. Further down the auxiliary path, I found a small and used control room tucked into the wall, a holdover from the older days of the underground. Dust blanketed everything inside. Maps, dials, old lockers with peeling paint. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it. For the first time in what felt like hours, I exhaled. The silence was thicker in here. Dead. The kind that made your ears hum because there was nothing else to hear. I slumped against the wall and tried to radio control again. Dispatch, this is Daniel Grant. I made it to auxiliary room 3B near Bond Street. There's something in the tunnels. It looks like me. It's dangerous. The radio cut out. Just static. Then through the tiny window in the control room door, I saw it. Standing in the tunnel. Still. Head cocked slightly like a curious animal. It wore my body. Same boots. Same dirty orange jacket. But the skin was off. Too smooth. Like a mask stretched over something underneath that didn't quite fit. And the eyes, there were too many. Black, beady pinpricks spread along the cheekbones and jawline, blinking independently. And then it smiled. Too wide. Teeth like splinters of bone. Sharp. Endless. The lights in the control room flickered, and when they came back, it was gone. But on the other side of the door, I heard something scrape against the metal. Claws. Testing. Tapping. Then I heard a voice inside the room with me. Not through the door. Inside the room. Let me in. My head whipped around. Nothing there. I'm cold. Daniel. Don't you remember being cold? I backed into the corner, trembling, staring at the ceiling, the vents, the lockers, anywhere the voice could be coming from. Then the lights shut off again. Total darkness. I don't know how long I stood there. Frozen. Eyes wide and pitch black. Then something exhaled against my ear. Slow. Vet. Close. I lunged for the door and threw it open, sprinting back into the auxiliary tunnel. The world around me was spinning. The walls weren't straight anymore. They shifted subtly, just enough to make you question your vision. Pipes bledderished. The lights above were buzzing in a frequency that made my teeth hurt. I turned a corner and stopped dead. Ahead of me, standing at the end of the tunnel, was me. But not just one version. Multiple. All identical. Standing shoulder to shoulder, forming a line across the tunnel. Each of them slightly wrong. Some had their heads tilted at impossible angles. Others had arms too long, legs too short, or jaws that dangled open, leaking something black. And every one of them whistled. That same high-pitched tone I'd heard on the train. A chorus of it, like a ritual, a warning, or a trap. I turned and ran the other way, only to find the path behind me blocked by darkness. Not shadow, but something living, writhing, pulsing like a breathing wall of ink. I was trapped, and then I heard a voice. Not mine this time, but my mother's. Soft, warm, familiar. Daniel, come here, baby. You're okay. I froze. She'd been dead for 10 years. I knew it wasn't real, but the voice, it felt real. It scraped something deep inside me. Some instinct to believe, to trust, to follow. I clenched my fists. You're not her, I said aloud, not caring anymore if it heard me. The darkness pulsed again, and this time it laughed. The laugh turned into a scream. Human at first, but quickly unraveling into something primal. Like a predator crying out in frustration because the prey had escaped too soon. Then silence. The clones were gone. The darkness retreated. I stood alone in the tunnel, shaking, And on the wall beside me, scrawled in what looked like blood, were 5 words. Don't speak its name aloud. It doesn't just take your face, it learns your memories. It mimics the people you've loved. And when it finally speaks in your voice, it's already too late. I thought hiding was enough, but now it knows what I fear most. I staggered through the narrow tunnel, blood thumping in my ears. My flashlight was down to a sickly flicker now, dying with every step. The emergency lights above me were nothing but dim red glows, spaced too far apart. Every few meters, I passed old storage rooms sealed behind rotted wooden doors or rusted grates. But no matter how far I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was behind me. Not walking, not breathing, just waiting. After the wall's warning, don't speak its name aloud, I hadn't dared make a sound. Not a word, not even a whisper, but my thoughts weren't safe anymore. Every time I remembered a voice, my mom's lullabies, my brother's laugh, even my own internal dialogue, somewhere in the tunnels, I'd hear them echoed back at me, as if the Skinwalker was digging, learning, stealing. I found an old signal technician's outpost, a cramped, windowless room built decades ago and long abandoned. The door was rotted, hinges barely holding, but I shut it behind me and slid an old metal filing cabinet in front of it. Inside, there was a cracked mirror above a rusted sink. The glass was so fogged and warped it barely reflected anything properly. But what it did show made my blood go cold. There were 2 of me, one standing, one slightly behind, staring over my shoulder. I spun, flashlight aimed high, but the room was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the second reflection was gone. I sat in the corner, trying to calm my breathing. That's when the lights buzzed and the room shimmered, just for a moment, like reality bent, and then a new sound, dripping from the sink. But the tap was dry. Pipes were rusted shut. Still, black fluid began to gather in the basin. Slowly, thick like oil, reeking like rot and burnt hair. I stepped closer, gagging as the stench hit, and then the black fluid rippled and formed a face. My own, but this time it spoke before I could. Daniel, you don't remember, do you? You opened the door once before. The voice wasn't a perfect match. It cracked in places, like an old recording buried under static. But it knew things no one else should. When you were 7, you found the mirror in the old station bathroom at Aldwych. You stared too long, and something stared back. Suddenly, the memory came flooding in. A field trip, the abandoned Aldwych station, sneaking away from the group. That mirror cracked and shadowed, a feeling that something smiled back when I smiled. I marked you then, the voice in the sink hissed. That's how I found you again. That's why you hear me. I stumbled back, knocking over a rusted chair. My body shook. I could feel it inside me now, crawling through my thoughts like maggots in soft meat. The mirror pulsed again. This time, it didn't show the room behind me. It showed my flat, my bedroom, my window. My girlfriend sleeping, peaceful, unaware. And behind her, in the corner of the room, me. Only it wasn't. Its mouth hung open, jaw unhinged down to the chest. Eyes glowing faintly red. And its arms? Too long, bending at wrong angles. She thinks it's you, the voice in the sink giggled. She let me in when you didn't come home. I screamed and smashed the mirror with a rusted wrench. Glass exploded, shards embedding in my arms. The black fluid hissed, evaporating into smoke that curled like fingers around my legs before vanishing. I had to get back, but the only path left was deeper. A maintenance ladder in the room led downward, the kind built for emergency staff access, decades unused. No light, just an endless shaft into pitch black. I hesitated, but then I remembered her face, that thing above her, and I descended. Each step creaked under my weight. I counted them. 47, 82, 110. There was no end. And the lower I went, the more the air changed. It wasn't just damp, it was wrong. Like I was breathing in a grave. The scent of iron and mold and decay pressed against my face like a wet towel. Then, a sudden clang. Below me, something moved. Fast. Slithering. I stopped. My flashlight trembled in my grip. Another clang. Louder. It was coming up. I panicked, scrambling the rest of the way down the ladder. When my boots hit concrete, I was in a vast underground chamber, one I'd never seen in any schematic. Cavernous, silent, and lined with hundreds of mirrors. Old Victorian mirrors, rusted bathroom mirrors, shards, panels. Every mirror showed a different version of me. Some looked just like me. Others were off, mouths sewn shut, eyes missing, skin pale and bloated. And each reflection stood still until I moved. Then, one of them blinked out of sync. It tilted its head, stepped forward, pressed its palm against the glass. And I heard it whisper, "Let me through, Daniel. I just want to wear you." The other reflections began to smile. Not my smile. Something hungrier. I turned to run, but the room had no exit. That's when I realized this was its nest. This chamber was where the Skinwalker fed. On identity, on memory, on self. And it had collected me here, piece by piece, through every mirror I'd ever looked into and wondered, what if something was staring back? I shut my eyes, covered them with shaking hands, but the mirrors still whispered. Voices calling out from the glass like fingernails tapping at the inside of a coffin. My flashlight finally died. Darkness swallowed everything. Then, from the center of the room, something stepped forward. Not just a mimic, not just a shadow. The original Skinwalker. Its body constantly shifted, faces rippling across its surface like water. A grandmother's laugh, a child cry, my scream, and it whispered my name in every voice it had stolen. When you stare into a mirror, something might stare back. But what if it's not content to just watch? What if it's learning, waiting for the moment to become you? I thought the Skinwalker only followed me underground, but now it's everywhere I've ever been reflected. There was no light left. The chamber was pitch black, yet I saw everything. Not with my eyes, no, they were shut tight. But the Skinwalker had pulled something deeper from me. It peeled back my thoughts like old wallpaper and forced its own images into my mind. It showed me reflections I didn't remember making. Moments stolen. Me brushing my teeth. Shaving. Crying in the mirror after Dad's funeral. Each version slightly wrong. An eye twitching the wrong way. A hand delayed. A smile lingering too long. All of them recorded. Stored in these mirrors. This was a gallery of me, built for something to wear. My breath shuddered in the silence. I took a step back and bumped into glass. A mirror, cold against the nape of my neck. And from it a whisper, "You can't leave. You're already in here with us." I turned and shattered it blindly with my elbow. The crack rang like a bell through the room. Suddenly, the other mirrors began to speak. Each reflection in each mirror moved on its own. Not in sync, not following me. One version of me began slamming his head into the glass, cracking his skull open. Another began laughing, maniacally, blood running from its mouth. One just stood and watched me, unblinking, slowly tilting its head, like a predator calculating its moment. Then, a new mirror lit up in the far corner of the chamber. Its surface glowed white. Inside it, my apartment. Lucy. She was on the couch, crying, holding her phone, trying to call me. She didn't know I was gone. But just behind her was me, or what she thought was me. Its skin shifted slightly every few seconds, like it hadn't fully settled into my shape. Its hand touched her shoulder. She didn't flinch. And then it looked up, not at her, at me. through the mirror. Its eyes gleamed. It smiled. "You're running out of time," it whispered. I slammed my fists against the walls, screaming, "I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" The reflections laughed. They mocked me, one by one, mimicking my words. "Kill you! Kill you! I'll kill me!" I collapsed to my knees. It had already replaced me. Maybe not completely, but soon. Lucy would sleep beside it, trust it, confide in it, and slowly forget me. That was its power, not just to wear a face, but to replace the soul behind it. A sudden wind surged through the chamber, icy, metallic, and wet. The mirrors rattled. Cracks split across the floor. A low, guttural sound echoed from the deepest end of the cave. Not a growl, a heartbeat, slow and heavy. Boom! The mirrors dimmed. Boom! Shadows rippled on the walls. And from the far end of the mirror chamber, something stepped out. Not from the dark, not from a tunnel, from a mirror. It didn't climb through. It simply shifted out of the reflection, like light peeling away from reality. It was me, but taller. Gaunter, eyes like black holes, pulling the light inward. Skin stretched tight, like wax over bone. Its voice came from under the skin, vibrating through muscle and blood. "This is the last time you'll see yourself." I turned and ran, dodging mirrors, reflections screaming as I passed. One reached out and grabbed my wrist through the glass. I yanked free, shards slicing into my hand, but I didn't stop. I dove through a crumbling archway that hadn't been there before. A hidden tunnel. Narrow, wet, and alive. The walls pulsed, moved. With each step, I felt the ground breathe, as if I were inside the creature itself. At the end of the tunnel, I found an old subway platform, collapsed, overgrown, and impossible to exist on any real map. And carved into the wall behind it with blackened bone. The only escape is through the true self. Below it, a shattered mirror. Unlike the others, this one didn't show my face. It showed a boy, 7 years old, crying. Me from that school trip to Aldwych. The first time I looked too long into a mirror, and something looked back. I knelt down, touching the reflection with shaking hands. And I remembered, the thing I'd forgotten, the thing I had hidden. Back then, I didn't just look into the mirror. I spoke to it. I whispered. If I disappeared, would anyone notice? And the voice had answered. I would. That's when it chose me. It wasn't just mimicking me now. It was fulfilling a promise. The shattered mirror began to bleed. Not red, not black, but silver, like molten mercury. And it poured down into the tracks below. I heard the Skinwalker approaching again, its dozens of voices merging into one long, drawn-out hiss. Let me finish what you started. I looked at the tracks, now glowing with silver. I looked back at the monster coming closer, wearing my face. And I made a choice. I jumped. As I fell through the mirror's reflection and onto the silver-drenched rails, I felt something pull from my chest. A cold wind ripped through my memories, yanking the pieces away from the Skinwalker like reclaiming stolen skin. It screamed. Mirrors shattered across the chamber. I hit the ground hard. Pain screamed through my body. But I was back, in a tunnel, real, and ahead of me, a light, a modern tube station, signs, security cameras, real people. I had made it out, but something fell off. People stared at me as I stumbled up the stairs. An old man looked at me, his eyes wide with horror. I found a mirror on the platform wall and looked at myself, and froze. No reflection, just empty glass. You think the monster's gone just because you made it out? That sunlight saves you? The truth is, the real horror begins when you realize the thing walking in your skin, smiling with your teeth, is still out there. And you might be the ghost now. No reflection. I blinked, turned my head. Nothing. People bustled around me on the platform, but no one met my gaze. Even the security cameras tracked me, then jerked away like they didn't want to look. It hit me like a frostbite to the soul. I'd escaped, yes, but not whole. The Skinwalker hadn't just mimicked me. It had siphoned me. What crawled out of that underground wasn't entirely human anymore. I stumbled home under a sky that felt wrong, like someone had painted it instead of it being real. The buildings were too still, the air too quiet. My key turned in the lock. Lucy's coat still hung on the hook, her shoes still by the door. Please just be safe. I stepped inside, and she was there, on the couch. She turned and froze. Her face went pale. "Ooh, who are you?" she whispered. "It's me," I said, but my voice, it came out thin like paper burning. My vocal cords scratched like glass. She backed away. "No, you're not. You're God, you're not him." She pointed behind me. I turned and saw me, the other me, the one with smooth skin, steady breath, normal eyes. He looked shocked, terrified, and then he smiled. "You followed me," he said softly, "even after I gave you a way out?" His voice was perfect, my exact tone. "I'm the one who belongs here now," he said. He turned to Lucy. "I told you this might happen," he whispered to her. "Remember? About his breakdowns, his episodes. We talked about this." She nodded slowly. "You said he might come back. They've been talking about me while I was still trapped underground." No. He stepped forward. "You gave me permission. Remember?" he said to me. "You asked the mirror if anyone would notice if you were gone." He leaned close. "Well, they didn't." I ran out the door, into the street. I could feel something inside me unraveling. I wasn't solid anymore. When I looked into a car window, no reflection. Storefront glass, nothing. A puddle, just shadows rippling in place of my face. I'd been replaced. Perfectly. And no one would ever believe me. I found myself back at Aldwych, the condemned station, the entrance sealed. But I heard it, soft and far below. A whistle. It was calling me. I followed the sound through a cracked drain shaft and back into the forgotten tunnels. But they'd changed. Where there were once brick walls and iron beams, now stood corridors of mirrors, pulsating with shadows. The Skinwalker's kingdom had expanded. It wasn't hiding anymore. And then, deep within the catacombs, I found them. Others. Not people, copies. Hundreds, lining the walls. A man screaming silently behind glass. His twin walking free above ground. A girl frozen mid-run. Her mirrored version a nurse at St. Bartholomew's now. A priest. A bus driver. A child. All taken. All replaced. And in the center of it all, a massive mirror 12 feet tall. It rippled like water, glowing softly with a dull silver light. This was the heart, the gateway, the mouth that swallowed identities whole. I stepped toward it, and behind the surface, I saw me again. The version of me now living my life. He was tucking Lucy into bed, smiling, laughing, being me better than I ever was. And then he looked up, right at me. He waved, and for the first time, I saw a crack form in his perfect expression. A glitch. His eye twitched too long. His hand repeated a gesture twice. He was losing control. I pressed my palm to the glass. It rippled. The stolen energy. The essence. It was still tethered here. This was my anchor. I slammed my fist into the mirror, again and again, until it began to bleed silver. The reflection screamed. The entire chamber shook, and in the real world, he clutched his chest. His face twisted. He looked at Lucy and whispered, "Something's wrong." Good. I threw myself into the mirror one last time. Pain tore through me, but I didn't stop. I ripped my memories out of its grasp. My voice, my walk, my grief, everything that used to be me, I took back. And suddenly, I was in my flat. in my own body, sweating, cold, on the floor. Lucy was across the room, looking between me and the thing still shaped like me. It was writhing, glitching, melting into something jagged, wrong, unfinished. It turned to me. You had your chance, it hissed, mouth unhinged. I stood. I'm taking it now. And I struck it with a mirror shard I'd carried back with me. It screamed, not in pain, but in disappointment. It shattered like glass. And then it was gone. Lucy ran to me. She held my face in her hands. And for the first time in weeks, I saw myself in her eyes again. The next morning, the news reported a fire beneath Aldwych. Structural collapse. No survivors in the old tunnels. The mirrors had buried themselves. Or maybe they just gone deeper. I don't look in mirrors much anymore. But sometimes, late at night, I hear a whistle just beyond the window. And when I glance toward my reflection, it doesn't always match. The end. If you love this descent into the underground, stay close to Creepy Hub. There are more tunnels beneath the stories we tell.